Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Officers Association webinar, when we'll be discussing transferring military skills into the boardroom in a very topical period, a post-COVID setting. And my guest speakers today are Joe Haig, CEO and founder of Onboarding Officers, and Philip Butler, who's an alumni of Onboarding Officers. So to introduce herself first, Jo, welcome. Jo is a great supporter of the OA, has spoken at a number of our events and has also run a number of webinars with us. So a very big welcome to you, Jo.
Thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about onboarding officers and hopefully give you some information about how we can help you transfer your amazing skill set into a commercial world and assist in the boardrooms of Britain, which I'm telling you now are in massive need of your services. So perhaps if we go on to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about myself. So I have spent the last 30 years building up a business called FDS, which is a corporate finance business. We help people buy and sell companies. And 2 years ago, I started onboarding officers, which I'll explain to you about a little bit later. As you can see, I've won a few awards, and I currently am a non-exec director of a number of chairs, of a number of companies, and most of those are as chair. Over the last 30 odd years, I've held 40 odd positions. I should tell you that's not because they keep sacking me, but rather I tend to work with a company towards a goal, whatever that might be. It might be a transfer to a new owner, or it might be part of an acquisition process. I do lots of presentations, both for the OA and for private companies and for people like the Institute of Directors. And I've published a few books. And my last one I wrote over our first lockdown, called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Starting a New Business. The one before that I wrote is called How to Be a World-Class Non-Exec Director, all available on Amazon. Please do buy them because I make as much as 6p per copy, so any purchase is most welcome. But seriously, you may find some of them interesting.
Can I just introduce Philip then? Philip's a serving RAF officer and an alumni of Onboarding's February 19 cohort. So Philip, big welcome to you.
Thank you, Clive.
Would you like to just say a little bit about yourself, Philip?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to do so. I haven't won any awards and not written any books, sadly, but I've been an RAF Wing Commander for a Wing Commander for a few years now and been serving in the Air Force for 17 years. And as Clive mentioned, I was part of the first cohort in February 19. And I have since taken up a role as a trustee at my daughter's school. And, you know, I'll be talking to you a little bit about that later in the webinar.
Thank you so much, Philip. And we're delighted to have somebody on our programme who's been an alumni. But as Philip said, he was actually very first cohort we had. So thank you so much. So, because of my experience in working in boardrooms for the past 3 decades, I was inspired to look at how we can change the diversity of our boardrooms. When people think about diversity, they tend to think of age, ethnicity, gender, and so on. But what I realised was missing is diversity of thought. My own son is an officer in the intelligence corps, so I am aware of the skill sets that are held across military personnel and the way that they tackle problems. And so I wanted to create a community. So our organisation is much, much more than a training organisation, and it is specifically for military officers. And my mission is to help them become what I call world-class non-executive directors. I'll explain more about what a non-executive director is shortly. But what we want to do in our organisation is we want you to harness and understand that the skills that you've developed over your career are transferable into the commercial world. And not only will you enjoy that, but the benefit for industry will be exponential. And I'm already seeing that from some of our alumni who are now in various posts. So whilst we have what we call an Insight programme, which is a 5-day accelerated training event where we look at everything from finance to governance to marketing to actually how to get those roles, how to put yourself forward for them, that is only very much part of the programme. So once you join onboarding, you will be part of this wonderful and growing community where you are supported by what we call SuperNeds. And these are serial non-executive directors from the commercial world who have been doing this a long time, and ambassadors who are your peers who have actually transitioned into the boardrooms, and they are available online to support and help you with everything from an interview technique, industry insights, help with your CV, or just somebody to talk to about a problem that you've got as you get in post. But we've also partnered with some amazing other organisations, including a wonderful disruptive online platform that completely changes how you can access non-exec roles. It's called New Role, that's N-U-R-O-L-E. It's an invite-only platform, and it deals specifically only with non-executive director positions. As soon as you've completed our Insight programme, we will immediately recommend you for that website, and they are throwing out opportunities all the time. We've also partnered with some other wonderful organisations, including Magic Circle law firms, Vistage, which is the world's largest CEO organisation, the Business Growth Fund, and others, and we're adding to that all the time. So that is who we are. Please do check out our website, and it'll tell you a little bit more alongside some of the testimonials that we've had from some of our fantastic alumni that have already gone through the programme. Why do I think that the military are a much overlooked group of people who can add so much value to our boardrooms, and never has there been a better time for you to demonstrate this skill set? While COVID has been an absolute worldwide disaster in some cases, it has also highlighted the need for a different way of thinking. And there's no doubt in my mind that those skills that you've developed over your years, including understanding about analysis, solving problems, fits very well with sitting in the boardrooms of Britain and beyond that are really struggling. One of the things that is very much missing is a calm and rational approach. Some of the boards that I work with and know on have actually gone into complete meltdown. And while we thought it was bad in March, to some extent, we really didn't know what was going to happen, and it was a bit of a novelty. And actually what I'm seeing now is a real impact on those businesses as they've lost staff and they've lost customers, but most importantly, they've also lost their way. And what they need help with is refocusing and understanding how they can deal with this new world that we're all having to learn about so quickly. And your understanding of what is called in your world the golden thread of logic is something that I can really emphasize can be brought into our boardrooms and change the mindsets of those people. One of the things that will just be part of your DNA is just the ability to keep going, the stamina. And that has been so evident in how the military have been brought in to deal with the testing and now the vaccination programme. And it seems to me that if any of you recall the Duracell bunny advert, that the military folks I know just keep going and keep going when other of us are likely to fall over because we are so world weary. And that's something as a senior officer you cannot let happen. And that is something that I think will be so valuable. And my job will to help you understand how you can take your military experience and put it into a CV that is going to make you extremely attractive to those people who really need what you are capable of doing. This, of course, links to what I was saying in that businesses are under so much pressure. And I have literally seen in board meetings that I have been attending over this last 9 months, people literally attacking each other, if not physically, verbally, because they are so war weary. They don't know what to do. And of course, we all know you tend to attack those closest to you. While some, and I'll share with you some of my success stories, I've had some great plans and they are surviving, most are not. And it is here that I think your ability to manage and handle pressure and bring to play what I think is a much underrated skill in a world-class NED. And that is, frankly, a sense of humour. I know that it's sometimes called the boardroom humour, but whatever it is, sometimes it is really appropriate to lighten things. And as a non-exec, that is part of your role, to bring back those executives from the face of adversity and help them find a way to a future destination, which we all know there will be one. So pressure. We've talked about, but it's the complex environment that we are in now. And on top of all this, of course, we're having to deal with Brexit and all the changes that is bringing about. You know, if COVID wasn't enough, Brexit seems to have just slipped through the net, and here we are now with people who've really got no idea how to deal with quite complex situations and literally pulling the spaghetti out of the middle of the bowl rather than trying to find the end. And here I think again that the military's understanding of how to bring about a simple solution to what appears in the first instance a very complex problem is something that we need. All of us need it, to keep briefings to the point, to help manage morale, because you can help those boards see that there is a route through this and that we can manage this together if we are focused and explain not only to our executive colleagues, but also to our staff, to our customers, to our suppliers, and indeed to anybody that might touch our business. And at the moment, so many of our boards in Britain just don't know what to pick up first. We all know that we need various specialists, whether it be in your particular brigade or whether in your particular boardroom. And whilst we don't all have to have that specialist skill, you do have to have some particular skills. And I think that the skills that you can bring in terms of analysing information, managing risk, helping people focus on what needs done is very important. You do not have to be a specialist in every area. As a non-executive director, you're not running a functional department. You are there to support and engage and encourage the executive board member to ask the ridiculous question, because perhaps there's somebody sat next to you who doesn't feel brave enough to do that, and to help them understand what the gaps are so that you can help fill those to the best of yours and the best of the team's ability. Never has there been so much change. One of the great things that the military have is an immersion in change. You're changing your roles, your position, even your physical and geographical location on a regular basis. That's not something that the civilian world is particularly used to. So as soon as you move from one posting to another, you've immediately got to integrate with your bosses and your colleagues, make friends and influence people, as they say. But you need to do that fairly rapidly because you know this may be only a short-term post. Whilst a non-exec director is likely to be in post from anything for 3 to 9 years, after that I think you get a little bit tame. What I hope that you would do is start on taking a number of positions, and you need to integrate yourself very quickly into these jobs. You need to pick what I call low-hanging fruit. Demonstrate something that you can do quickly that will make a major difference. And when Philip talks to you later on, he's going to explain how he did that in the school board that he joined after he left our original Insight programme. The enemy that you're faced in your career is in a way no different to the enemy that businesses face. It could be a competitor, it could be a member of staff, it could be another board member or a shareholder. And in fact, I've just come off a call with a board that is in complete free fall because one of the directors has set up a competing business. Now, strictly in law, that's not allowed, but the fact is he's done it. And the chief exec who rang me to say, I just don't know what to do, is in such an emotionally poor state that she's lost her way. What we obviously need is a plan, a carefully drawn out plan to deal with this in a logical fashion. But she was desperate just to talk to somebody, and that is definitely part of a non-exec's role. And of course, this is something that you're very good at. It's what you were born to do. It's what you've been trained to do. And any decent officer will be very, very good at handling that difficult and challenging situation. And more importantly, helping and leading the people through to a solution. So you might not have sat in a boardroom as such, but I'm perfectly sure that you've sat in several command rooms, and it really is no different. The boardroom is where decisions are made. Well, at least we hope they are. Of course, there's a lot of people at the moment who are finding it difficult to make a decision because their crystal balls have all clouded over or even broken, and their tarot cards aren't reading properly. And by that I mean, every time they produce a set of numbers or review a strategy, something happens to change it. We go into another lockdown. We have a new variant of the virus. Brexit adds a load more red tape to it. But that is where, as a non-exec, you are there to help the CEO and the CFO and the CTO make decisions. And where you have sat in command rooms with your colleagues, those are the equivalent of the people sitting in a boardroom. In a boardroom, it's all about having a really great discussion. In fact, I say that if two people agree on the board, one of them's unnecessary. You really need people to disagree until, of course, you get to a great conclusion. And that's where you need a good non-exec and often a good non-exec chair. And if you join smaller independent businesses, and that's the area I work in, and actually, ladies and gentlemen, that is 90% of the 3 million businesses out there. That is where you will almost by osmosis become the chair of that board, even if you're not officially named it, because very often you'll be the only non-exec or maybe two. And I think your natural leadership skills will make you the obvious choice for the chair. Now, this is a very interesting role because you are not there to make the decision as a non-exec. You are there to help the executives make the decision and to challenge that process so that ultimately that board come to the best and what we all believe is in the best interest of the company's decision. And I think that this is something that not only will you be great at, but you'll love doing. It's just wonderful to help people solve problems and find a way through to probably another problem. But that's the joy of the journey of a non-exec. So as you transition out of the military, you may be thinking, well, what am I going to do? And of course, you can apply for a full-time executive role. And that doesn't mean that this program isn't appropriate for you, because it is quite appropriate to have a full-time executive role and have a non-executive role side by side with that. Or you may think, actually, what I want is a portfolio of non-executive roles. So first of all, let me just explain to you the difference between an executive and a non-executive. So an executive is a full-time job in a business where you have a functional responsibility. You could be, for instance, responsible for risk or strategy. So you have got a day-to-day job in the business, and you may or may not be a member of the board of directors. A non-executive role has no functional job, no day-to-day role. It's unlikely that you will be an employee. you'll probably likely set up a personal service company and build that company on a monthly retainer business. And of course, if you join our Insight program, I'll explain exactly how to do that and how that process works. Some organisations do like the non-exec to actually go on their payroll, and certainly if you join a larger organisation, that is now actually mandated in law. But for more modest sized company, you will be billing the company on a monthly basis. So you're part of the board and you have what's called joint and several responsibility. So we're working together to work in the best interests of the business. So whereas an executive director will come to work on a day-to-day basis and carry out their functional role, a non-executive director is not doing that. You're coming to board meetings, but that doesn't mean that's all you're doing, because of course you're interacting and supporting the executives. And we've all found that working remotely is no more of a problem than we ever thought it might have been in the past. And so I'm usually on the phone to my CEOs in particular, but sometimes the CFOs, on probably a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, dependent on what crisis is happening. So the job of the NED is to strategically help guide the business to its chosen direction. And if it can't or hasn't made a clear decision on what that direction is, help them find it, to challenge the executive directors in a constructive manner, and to be an ambassador for that business externally, to represent that business. So it's a great and exciting role. And you'll see in a moment the different boards I sit on, which will give you an idea of the variety of the work I'm involved in. So there is so many opportunities out there, which I'm going to explain to you in a moment. But it is a really exciting job. There's nothing like really helping somebody define where their future is. And that is probably one of the most exciting parts of the job, is helping them decide where is their destination. And one of the things I do in my roles is I run what I call dream days, where we take the whole board away and sometimes some of the executive team, and we just vision what the future might be like. And if you come on our Insight program, I'll give you the tools to do that. But that's a great fun session, and I usually do that at least annually with my boards. It's almost certainly, and there's been a lot of it through COVID, a lot of coaching and mentoring. There's a lot of apparent confident CEOs out there, but like many people, they suffer from imposter syndrome. And sometimes they just need somebody to say, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go next. Will you tell me? Now, to be quite honest, I find that they actually do know, but they just need to talk it out. So you need to be able to listen. As I've mentioned, in my opinion, one of the most underrated skills for a NED is to have a great sense of humour. And I have seen firsthand some of the wonderful humour in our Insight programmes that we've delivered so far. And of course, you need to be a great communicator. It's a given, isn't it, in your industry? You have to communicate at all levels, internally and externally, and to provide this calm steering hand in the crisis that we're all going through. So there are 6 million businesses in the UK. Of those, 3.5 million of them are limited companies. And most of those businesses are SMEs. So that's small to medium-sized businesses. And that's where I work, in that sector, with entrepreneurial people who have a very high risk appetite, and they are a joy and a nightmare to work with. The reason I tell you that is that there are literally millions of non-executive directors. So there are plenty of opportunities out there. It's just making sure that you're in the right place and at the right time. And one of the things I will say about you, it's not so much who you know, but who knows you. And I'm quite aware that perhaps some of you will have been in a position where perhaps a low profile is very important, My own son in the intelligence corps, you know, he doesn't step near social media. However, when you step out of the military, in order to become noticed, we have to change that, of course, in the most appropriate way. And we show you how to do that in a safe way that is going to get you known to the right people. You have to become what we call a trusted advisor, a voice of something in which you have lots of experience, so that when people think about something, whether it be cybersecurity or risk or wherever we can pull out that expertise, they think of you. Government is forcing directors to be more accountable than they have ever been before. There are more directors in the dock than ever before, and companies are more accountable. I read only yesterday that 8 of the directors from Carillion are facing disqualification. And that isn't just the directors that were there at the point of the failure of the business, but directors that had been there historically. So I'm not going to say that this job isn't without risk, but as you know, Winston Churchill said, with greatness comes responsibility. And I'll just add to that, that with greatness comes responsibility and risk. So those boards are looking for strong, independent people. And I think skills that are outside those industries is much more relevant. When I tell you shortly that, you know, I sit on the board of a waste management company, and at the opposite end of the spectrum of a perfume distribution company, that perhaps it gives you an example of the diversity of the businesses that I sit in. Clearly, I know nothing about waste management or perfume, but I do know how to ask awkward questions. I do know how to be there to support people going through a very difficult time. And COVID-19 has definitely showed how unprepared boards were for this sort of occurrence. So, these are just some examples of where I've literally felt I've sat in a war room. So one of the businesses I work with is a waste management company. They're in the north of England. Most of their business, and by most I mean 70% plus of their business, was collecting waste from the hospitality sector. As you can imagine, on lockdown 1, their business more than halved overnight and has continued to decrease. Only when we had the few months over summer when it was the Eat Out campaign did it pick up. But as you can imagine, this is not a business that has had a happy time through this period. And although furlough has helped them massively, they are in free fall at the moment. And I have a board meeting with them next week. And as at the moment, we can see no sight to the end of this lockdown, we are going to have to completely reimagine this business. So the second business here is a precision engineering business whose focus was on aero parts. So of course, the airline industry also went into free fall at the beginning of this. But I'm delighted to tell you that this business, which is owned by an ex-military personnel, has more than survived, it has thrived. They were the only business I worked with that had a plan for something that looks like COVID. And they were very agile in their ability to turn around to start production of other equipment and parts, not least, of course, ventilators. And they were one of the first companies in the country to start making ventilator parts. So they have actually started now working for military suppliers of aircraft, which is still, of course, a very relevant industry for them. The next business is a tech business. Now, they've also done amazingly well because this is a company run by a very young gentleman. I mean, he looks like a child to me, but apparently he's 28. But they've survived amazingly because they write the software for internet shopping channels. So, of course, as everything's gone online, they have got more business and they know what to deal with. And they've also been a really interesting business to work through this process, because the hardest thing for them is that, of course, they've had to close their offices and they have an average age of 23 of their developers, and they're struggling very much, not with the workload, but working from home. They don't want to work from home. They want to be in the fun environment of all working together. So that's been our biggest challenge there. And then I worked with an energy broker, a brilliant company, and absolutely were amazing, doing amazing business, fantastic profit. I mean, if I tell you, they were making 40% net profit, which is very rare in any industry. However, they've started to struggle massively because the businesses that they're selling energy to are either locked down or in such a poor state that those decision makers simply will not make a decision. So that is causing us a different problem, because we've got a fantastic product, which is actually making the businesses that they sell it to more profitable, but we can't get those businesses to make a profit. So we're having to re-strategize how we can get those people to make a decision, which would be the right decision if we could only get hold of them. And then I mentioned the perfume distributor. This is an organization that sells, well, the most expensive perfume I've ever seen. If I tell you it is £1,000 for 100 mils, probably like yourself, this isn't something that I was going to buy regularly or expected in my Christmas stocking. But as most of their perfume was sold through bricks and mortar stores like Harrods and Harvey Nicks and Selfridges, of course, not only have they been locked down, but all the international visitors who would purchase those sorts of products just haven't been coming. And so sales have plummeted and halved. So what we're having to do there is take this business online. Now, they did have some online channels, but it means a whole change of the business. Again, we're reimagining what this business will have to look like post-COVID. So I'd really like if it would be okay for Philip to tell you a little bit about his experience. As I say, he was literally on our first cohort and he's been a wonderful advocate of ours. So I hope you've enjoyed that little presentation, but over to you, Philip.
Thanks very much, Jo, really much appreciated. So I think just as a bit of background, first of all, I went on the onboarding officers course because a few years ago, I realised that I'd actually quite like to be part of a board of a company at some point. And I was very much looking towards the time after I left the military. And I thought it was a good opportunity to get some knowledge and some experience before I found myself in the situation of wanting to get that paid role, that big role perhaps that I was looking for further down the line. I had some confidence or some belief that I had some of the skills that were required, but the thing about the course was that it gave me that full confidence and it gave me the specifics, which I just didn't know because I've not been in that business world. And that was the thing that first week provided to me. And I just echo Jo's point, is the journey didn't end there. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of the super Neds that Jo has referred to just talk things through. Sadly, because of the lockdown, I didn't have the opportunity to go and sit in on the board as was planned. But all of these opportunities have and will exist in the future. And I think that's why onboarding officers has been the gift that keeps giving, really. So I just offer that up front. Realising that holding down, or first of all, getting a paid position straight off, and certainly trying to get a paid position when I was still serving, was probably not realistic. I actually took on a pro bono role at my daughter's school as a trustee, and I joined in mid-2019. And obviously 6 months or so into the time of being there, it was clear that something was going on the other side of the world. And as it got into Italy, I thought, well, this is something we probably need to think about. What does this mean? And I think it's just that experience that we've got, and that, you know, that just way of working that we've got, in my experience, 2 tours at PGHQ, where you watch the news because that could be today's workload. And it gave me, you know, that experience got me thinking about, well, what does this really mean for the organisation? And I think it was clear that the board was just inexperienced and ill prepared for doing something like this. And why would it be experienced in this area? So I set about doing some planning about, well, what does this mean for the school? What does it mean in terms of, what would happen if we had to shut completely? How long could we survive for with the money we've got if we're required to pay wages? What if we weren't required to pay wages? Is that morally the correct thing to do or not? And it was being able to work through all of these questions, just through my experience of having done the military estimate, that actually set us up to be ready when March came along and we had to make these decisions. So we already had lined up a number of courses of action of what we would do depending on what happened. And we were just able to pull it off the shelf and away we go. And where we saw a lot of other organizations, a lot of schools around us and, preschools and things like that, who didn't have these plans to take off the shelf, who went into a little bit of a flat spin, we were ready to go. And that meant that we were able to give the parents certainty, we were able to give the staff certainty, and it was, it was very good to know where we were going. And it also gave us the opportunity to just remind ourselves why we were there. Our responsibility is to provide childcare, to educate children, and also to allow their parents to go to work. And having that, selection and maintenance of the aim, as a number of us will know, having that in our minds has meant that we've remained true to achieving that during the course of COVID, even as things have changed in terms of lockdown restrictions and the like. We have had that true north, for want of a better way of putting it, that we were able to aim at and make sure we were making the right decisions. A lot of you probably listened to what I've said there and gone, well, yeah, that's blindingly obvious, isn't it? Yeah, but that's the point of why, I've given this, this story of what I've done, is because it is blindingly obvious to us. And I don't think we realize until we look elsewhere that it's not blindingly obvious to other people, that you need to plan, you need to have a number of contingent plans lined up on your shelf so that you can pull it off the shelf at the moment you need it. And I think the board has appreciated having someone who was able to think in that way. So if this is something that interests you, something you think you can get great fulfillment from and enjoyment from, and I certainly have, then you would be reassured that you've got that base level of skills. And actually, with the opportunity to do a program like onboarding officers, you will have the specifics you need to really bring your experience from the military to bear. That's all I've got to say there, Jane.
Thank you so much. And I know when Philip told me this, and I have to say, I really wish we'd had more Philips in some of our schools than now, because you were so quick off the mark, and it does show that your calm approach makes such a difference. The pre-planning makes such a difference. I listen on the news to head teachers now and think, oh my gosh, they are just so lost. Anyway, thank you very much. I think we've got a few questions, Clive.
Yes, we have a few questions. So the first question from Joanna: it sounds like you are convinced of the merits of ex-military as NEDs. To what extent is the SME community equally convinced?
So this is a journey, like any journey, and I think you can only demonstrate it by actually doing the role. So it is the, chicken and egg situation. But what I've been helping the alumni with is to take their skill set and put it into a form in a CV that somebody looking for a NED can understand. And as I mentioned, we need to make you a trusted advisor, a thought leader in something that is appealing to that SME community. So I don't want them to necessarily think of you as ex-military. I want them to think of you as bringing a new dimension to their board. So we all read all the time about trying to change the board makeup. And this is the opportunity to show how you can bring about that change by bringing about the different methods of thinking about a problem and helping solve it. And we would encourage you, and myself and my colleagues would work with you on how to up that profile, so that if people are thinking about, well, I really need somebody in this sector, they immediately think of you. And that is what we do. And it is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, because if I may tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the problem is that a civilian sees your incredible history and are frightened that you will be so much better than them. Now, the brave men and women out there will embrace that. But some will think, oh no, this person is just going to know so much more about things than I know, and they're going to make me look stupid. So we have to, if you like, play to what you're great at so that you look really inviting. And that takes time, but we're here to do that with you.
Joe, I'll just add a couple of things to that, I think, is,
Sure.
you know, as much as I've enjoyed my role, I don't want to be doing pro bono roles forever, but I need to enter in somewhere. And actually, you know, a school trustee is a really good place to start. You know, it's all very well we saying that. That's the only role I've held. But, you know, what I can then reflect in my next application is that I have actually done this role, and I've got some experience that isn't scary military. I run around with a rifle perception that perhaps there is elsewhere.
That's very, I mean, the fact that you can say you've sat on a board, because a school trustee is a board, it's got loads of responsibilities and liabilities, that immediately makes you more likely for me to talk to you, because I'm thinking, oh, you're not jumping straight out of the military. You've never sat in what is perceived as a boardroom, even though we know you have, because you've sat in a command room.
Yeah.
Now that you can actually say you've done that and you've worked with other civilians in that area, immediately you're more attractive. Also, I'm pretty sure, Philip, you'll have learned what's working and what isn't working, because I've certainly learned what doesn't work as much from these roles as what does.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I'd add as well is, which counters my first point actually, but it's worth mentioning, is I applied for a non-executive director role for Mental Health First Aid England, which is a pretty big organisation these days, and something I'm very passionate about. And I got invited for an interview, and there were, you know, I didn't get the role, but 100 and odd people applied last time, and I got invited for an interview. So it's worth remembering, if you can translate your skills properly, then they are attractive skills. It's just about making sure, you know, that we deal with some of the prejudices and perceptions there may be out there when you're putting that application together.
And as you know, Philip, we do talk about that pre-appointment due diligence, what happens at that first interview, what you should say, what you shouldn't say, what you should find out. So actually have interviews. It's great. You never know who you'll meet. You will learn from that interview.
Yeah.
Great.
Anything else, Clive? Any more questions?
We've got several other ones.
Great.
I'm going to ask one from Neil. Neil is actually attending your first cohort, the 2021 first cohort in April. And he asked, or he says actually, Joe, excellent presentation, thank you. Are there any deep opportunities worldwide, please?
Of course, you know, in terms of governance and financial understanding and marketing strategy, those are completely transferable skills. And certainly some of the alumni that we've had, I'm just thinking of one particular person who'd spent a lot of time in France, and he's completely bilingual, and he is applying to companies in the UK who want to get a footprint in France because of Brexit. And so we've been looking at his skill set, and because of his language skills, that's first of all one barrier removed straight away. Because he did, you know, a lot of sort of, I guess, almost like diplomatic missions there. He's got a lot of skills in building relationships. So may not so much work for a French company immediately, but work for a British company that wants to get that international footprint. So yes, there are, of course, but I mean, the only thing that would be different internationally is some of the law. But I was running an event actually for non-exec directors in Kuala Lumpur yesterday, and their law is extremely similar to ours. But obviously I can't say, you know, that is a worldwide replication, but there are a lot of similarities. But then again, you're not meant to be the in-house lawyer. You've just got to know what great looks like from a governance point of view and the basics of doing the right thing.
Joe, I'm going to ask a question that was asked right at the start of the presentation, and to a certain extent it may already have been answered, but It's from Len. How can onboarding officers help a former Royal Navy officer who is an MBA and who has been an operations consultant for more than 16 years, but who's very keen to help firms as an NED?
Well, as I say, that this isn't just about the Insight programme, it's about joining the community. It's about having access to all these other partners that we've got, from New Roll to DAC Beechcroft to Vistage to the Business Growth Fund. It's about having access to our SuperNeds and our ambassadors to help you get that role, and then help you when you're in that role if you have any issues that you want to discuss. I mean, there's opportunities, and unfortunately because of lockdown we haven't been able to do it physically, but to actually come and observe board meetings. And one of the officers who came on our October cohort, she is observing actually 2 of my board meetings this month. One on the it's a financial services company that deals with putting assets, particularly in this case it's aircrafts, into tax shelters based in the Isle of Man. She's sitting in on that, and then she's also sitting in on the tech company, and that those are things that are going to show you firsthand what happens in boards. Now, obviously you're not joining in that boardroom debate, but you are seeing sort of the different activities that go on. And you can't get that sort of experience anywhere else, because it's a real privilege to sit in and observe somebody's board meeting.
Joe, I'd also add that the one thing that because I've got an MBA as well, so one thing that I thought onboarding officers added to me is it gave me that that detailed toolkit that I needed. I could refer back to some of the reference stuff that you gave me. It's far, you know, I don't mean this in a derogatory way. It's far lower level than you get on the MBA, because the MBA is strategizing and all of that sort of stuff. It actually gave me something that I could pick up, and I'm going to take that into the meeting today because I'm going to refer to that. And I felt that it gave me that toolkit when I've not been in a boardroom situation in a civilian context before, to actually use those toolkits, and you know the kind of things I'm referring to.
That's what we really would challenge to do, was to produce something practical. I am not creating an MBA program. This is not about the qualification. This is about giving you the confidence and, as you say, Phil, the toolkit, so that when you go to apply for a job, you know what you should be asking. You should know what to find out about the company before. You should know how to prepare your CV. You should know how to pitch yourself on the social media platforms. You should understand the language used by the CFO, which can be daunting for even somebody who's in a civilian world. But we're not training you to be, the finance director. We train you to be a great non-exec director with practical skills. So I'm great and glad to hear you say that. I mean, we even give you such simple tools of what a board pack should look like, how to do minutes, really practical stuff that clearly you don't get on an MBA, because that is a much more academically focused program. This is a practical program. And I must add as well, of course, delivered by practitioners. But all of us that deliver this are all serial non-exec directors. So we're talking from not from some theoretical book, but from what we've done, what's worked, I've got so many tales from the boardroom that I'm thinking of writing another book.
We'll look forward to that one. I've got several other really super questions, Joe. David asks, many boards I've looked at seem to be keen for their NEDs to have had significant commercial experience or be accountants or legal experts. The non-specialist NED is very valuable, he agrees, but many companies seem more fixated. Is it still worth applying for NED roles that advertise commercial, accountancy and legal-based posts?
So let's first of all take the commercial experience. And this is what I've mentioned a couple of times now. What we need to do is we need to translate your military experience into commercial experience. So it is almost, well, it's more than de-jargonizing it, but it's saying, what have you done in the military that would easily translate into the board? And we run a whole session on that as part of the Insight programme. In terms of people asking for a lawyer or an accountant, what they're looking for is a part-time in-house counsel or a part-time FD. So I would generally ignore that in putting me off applying for a job. What I would emphasise is your ability to understand the basics of financial management, which we will be giving you on the Insight programme, and to understand the basics of law, which we'll also be giving you. If they are so set on having a lawyer or an accountant, you might not even want to join that board, because I personally cannot think of anything more boring than a board made up of lawyers and accountants. I mean, it would just be so deadly dull. Clive?
I was a bit stunned by that last comment. You are an accountant, are you not?
Yeah, I know, but I'm not your average accountant. And I'm also a lawyer, and I hate lawyers. So, you know, what we want to do is emphasize something that you are great at, that company goes, actually, like they did with Phil on the company he applied for recently. I want to see him. I want to see her, because they sound interesting. What have they got? If you fill your boardroom with all of the same, you get the same boring decisions and the same boring process. We need somebody to shake it up, and now more than ever, it needs shaking up. Reimagining is my word for 2021. We have to reimagine these businesses' future.
A great word to carry with us. Joe, Philip, an anonymous question. Is there a view on whether the core military skills fade for veterans who've started a second career and have been away from the armed forces for a while?
I think Philip's probably better to comment on that, although I know you're still a serving officer, Phil, but...
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, you know, because obviously I haven't got personal experience of it, but, you know, whilst, as with any CV, it moves down the CV because it's further away from where you are at the moment. I should imagine, and clearly, you know, I don't know your personal circumstances, but your principles, your tenets, your skills that you hold as a military person undoubtedly were drilled into you so well during your time serving that you still hold those things true now. And actually understanding what you bring as a military person, you're undoubtedly bringing to your role that you're carrying out at the moment. And therefore, you know, those headlines, which, you know, as Jo has said during the bit she's you know, she's briefed earlier, we're trying to demilitarize the specifics about what you're doing. It's the way you operate. It's your ability to deal with uncertainty. It's your ability to make decisions. Yeah. That's still as relevant, you know, now as it was then. You will probably bring it out in slightly different and more up-to-date examples.
I think that's very well said, and actually it's in no way negative that you've had experience outside the military, but I would have thought that some of the skills that, you know, as Phil says, were drilled into you are now just so part of your DNA, you can never lose it. I mean, I trained as a lawyer, so I know I can be particularly anal on certain things, you know, and I don't want to be, but it's how I was trained.
I know this isn't the point that was being made, but, you know, I wasn't invited for interview through benevolence because I was ex-military. It was because of the skill set I brought out in my CV. And therefore, you know, even if your military experience is a bit further back than perhaps it is for me, you still have those skills that you're bringing to the table. And it's the skills that are attracting you to the organisations, not your current military, you know, service.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what I would hope is that when they meet the individual with those military skills, they will see that added little alchemy that can really change the dynamics.
Good, thank you. Excellent answers there. Can I go on to the next question then from Neil, who says, you have very well explained the benefits a service person can provide to a boardroom. On the basis someone's strength could be their weakness if overdone, what advice can you offer us about what to guard against in a boardroom environment when compared to a military environment?
Jo, can I answer that?
Yeah, yes, sure. Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure my, just get on with it, sort of approach to things, and your, expectation of the way that service personnel behave, of just doing stuff, it, gathers that much traction. There's a lot more, persuading and coercing and all of that sort of stuff that you need to bring to the board. And there would be a danger that, I could have, and I might have on occasions not quite got it right. Right, pin your ears back. Here's the plan. This is what we're doing. Let's get on with it. And of course, it doesn't work like that on a board, because, I am just part of the board. I don't hold that, that senior executive position where I can tell everyone to just get on with it. So I think that was probably the thing that I had to adapt to. A crisis in the military is right, here we are, we could be working 18 hours a day for the next few weeks, let's get on with it, we're all going to do this, aren't we? And it's not quite the same. So, there is a bit of presentation, I think, that you've got to watch.
Yeah, I think there's a bit more of a collaborative approach in a board, because you're one amongst equals. What I was going to say is, I think is the hardest thing to overcome is the view that a lot of commercial people have is based on what they've seen on television of military people. So they perceive them to be arrogant, opinionated. And I have not seen that in any of the alumni. And we've had 3-star generals through our programme who have actually amazed me with how humble they are. So it's getting over that perception. And I think, and actually, I'm not military, but I am a natural problem solver. And like Philip, I want to go, right, okay, let's do this, because this is obviously the best thing to do. And you have to hold yourself back as a Ned. When I'm in my CEO role in my own company, it's entirely different. And to my Ned who's going, well, Jo, I think we should talk about this a bit further, and have you thought of this? But if you're a natural problem solver, then you want to find the solution, because you know innately what it is, and you have to. I mean, I actually dig my fingernails into my hand to stop myself go, oh, this is a bloody stupid, and why don't we just do this? Clearly, you can't do that as a Ned. So I think that's probably the hardest thing to overcome, which I think is echoing what Phil's saying.
Yeah, we had an interesting comment from James of this. He says, I've been out of the RF for 7 years, and the skills of being an officer, leader, manager do not fade. So thank you for that, James. Philip, can I go on to the next question from Adrian? He says, Philip mentioned that he thought getting a paid position straight away was challenging. Would Jo advise pursuing unpaid roles initially, as opposed to attempting to build a portfolio NED roles, possibly pursuing this later when more experienced as an NED?
There's no doubt that the person that takes on an officer, however wonderful their CV is, who has never sat in a commercial boardroom, feels that they are brave. They're taking a brave step. So it does help to have had some sort of other board experience, whether that be a charity or whether it be some sort of not-for-profit business. But there are some organisations who are more interested in taking people with perhaps less experience. I'm thinking particularly housing associations, because they have quite a big churn of their non-exec directors, and their boards are virtually all non-execs, save for the CEO, and they churn their directors every 3 to 6 years. And those are paid roles. They're not brilliantly paid. Although, as a first role, they usually pay between 8,000 and 10,000 a year for 12 board meetings. So I guess that doesn't sound too bad, really. But of course, you can earn a lot more as you get more and more experience on your CV. I've just seen, Clive, a message from Ivana, who was on our first course with Phil. And Ivana and I have spoken lots. And I think she was saying, Ivana, that you've secured a role through New Role, I believe. I know Ivana can't speak, but Clive, I don't know if you've seen her question or her comment.
Yeah, Ivana says, hello, Ivana here. I was on the first cohort with Phil and have recently started my own non-exec role. I would like to raise the point that there are also a lot of opportunities and vacancies which are still military based or run by ex-military. For me, the charity I now work for is run by an ex-naval officer and a barrister. As such, I haven't had to prove my leadership skills and experience. It's taken for granted as an ex-military. I found this exceptionally useful as a, she quote, small female. Interesting one, Ivana. Thank you for that. We're running.
And I know Ivana and we spent some time talking about the questions before she went for the interview, and we looked at her CV, and it came through one of our wonderful partners. So I'm so glad you're on the chat. But you know all this stuff, Ivana, but it's great to hear from you, and congratulations.
And as you quoting you, Ivana, as a small female, just thought you'd all like to know that we are running a Women into Employment event in March. But thank you for your comments there. I'm going to go on with some questions. Are you okay for more questions, Philip, Joe?
Yes.
That's fine.
From our anonymous attendee again, and from Christian, is there a preferred rank that is looked for if you want to move into an NED role, or what's the minimum rank that NEDs tend to have?
So I'd like to tell you, first of all, that as a person from the commercial world, really one rank and another don't mean very much to us civilians at all. You know, until I got more involved in this world and understood about my husband's career, I really couldn't have told you the difference between a captain and a colonel, or a brigadier, or a 1-star or 2-star general. So really, being honest with you, I think your rank will not really mean very much to the people that you're applying. It's much more about what you're bringing to the party. I'm not in any way trivializing the fantastic ranks that you've achieved, but I just don't think that really is relevant to the boardrooms. If they want you just because you're a 3-star general, you're joining the wrong company. They should want you because of what you can do, not because of the rank that you achieved.
And it comes back to translating what you did, you know, your span of responsibility, the kind of decisions you were making. You know, if you were, you know, working at troop level or flight level up to, you know, brigade level, you know, you've still got a span of responsibility, and you are able to articulate that in your you know, your application or in your discussion with a company, you know. And we must remember that actually a lot of these organizations are relatively small in terms of, you know, the SMEs will be relatively small in terms of the number of people, and I'd be pretty sure at a lot of levels you will have already, you know, had responsibility for you know, that many people and more besides. So, you know, just think about how translatable it is, and remember that in the military we get a lot more supervisory and leadership responsibility a lot earlier than a lot of our peers. And I think if you consider the organization that you're thinking of applying for and start to look at how big it is and what it's responsible for, you might surprise yourself.
I mean, I suspect, Philip, when you you know, went to work in the school, they really wouldn't have known the difference between a squadron leader and a wing commander, and we just wouldn't know. It's not something that we are used to understanding, and it wouldn't matter to me at all what your rank were. It's what can you do.
Yeah, exactly. And if you consider, you know, Mental Health First Aid England is a big old organisation. It's done a lot of fantastic stuff on a national level. But at the point at which I applied, my squadron was bigger than their headquarters. So, you know, it's you've got to balance that. And I hasten to add, not aircraft squadron, so it's not, you know, it's not a massive squadron. It was, you know, I was able to make comparative comments in terms of scale of responsibility. So, you know, just think about it in those terms.
Yeah, thank you, Phil.
I've got 2 or 3 more questions, which I'll lump a couple together. I know you answered this on the previous webinar we ran from Jonathan. Do you recommend the IOD certificate in company direction courses? Yeah,
I mean, actually, I teach on that program as well, and I wrote the program for the non-exec, which isn't actually on the normal certificate program that you're talking about, and it's a great program. You know, if you've got the opportunity, I'd do both. but it's totally different to what we do. It's a totally different program. It's much more academic. It's geared towards getting the exam. All the practical stuff that I've talked to you about today that we do on onboarding, you don't have. And of course, there's no community. There's no opportunities to visit boardrooms, to be part of the DAC Beechcroft, for instance, which is one of our partners. They've got a non-exec club. You know, there's none of that. But I wasn't seeking to set up a business that competes with the IOD. I work for the IOD and have done for years. This is a completely different program. And we've had quite a few people on the program who, and have joined our community, who have done the IOD program. And we've had some, you know, I remember one group, and this guy said at the start, well, I don't really know what I'm going to learn from this, Joe, because I've done the IOD program. And he's been one of our best advocates, saying, this is just a completely different approach. We, you know, Philip mentioned earlier about practical skill sets. It's a different approach and a different outcome totally. And of course, then there's the ongoing community.
Great, thank you, Jo. Just a very last one then, because I recognise now we're under time constraints. We've had the slide up with the 4 cohorts that you're running this year. Yeah. One of the attendees asked, can you provide an overview of the Insight programme?
It's all, if you go onto our website, the details of the whole Insight programme and everything else to do with the community is all there. If, however, you wanted to have a call, if you email info@onboardinggroup.com, we can set up a call either with myself or one of my colleagues to talk you through it in more detail and take any personal questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jo. A very big thank you to Jo and to Philip. Thank you both for the wonderful presentation, for answering these questions. And I hope everybody found the webinar of great interest. We've put up there for some time now the 4 cohorts this year that Onboarding Officers is running. So please look into those, particularly the one in the end of April, which is the first one coming up. Are these run virtually or face-to-face, Jo?
I made a decision quite early on not to run these virtually because they're so interactive. We obviously had to cancel last year's March event. We were going to run this one in March, but it looks like we may not be able to do that physically. That's why we've moved it to the end of April. I mean, I'm doing lots of virtual events, but they tend to be shorter, you know, maybe a 90-minute session. And this is such an in-depth interactive program. I'm doing everything I can to avoid going virtual. Just to say as well, we're not quite full, but we're half full on that first event, and we've certainly got places on the other cohorts. But I think April, because we only take a maximum of 15 people, and I think, and Nikki, my colleague, would tell me we've either got 7 or 8 people already booked on that.
Very good. Jo, Philip, thank you both very much indeed. This has been a fabulous presentation and really enjoyed listening to it. And to all of you participants who've all the attendees who've stayed on, thank you also for joining us. So thank you also for Paula and Nikki who've been in the background supporting us. And I will just close by saying thank you all very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Philip.
No, thank you, Jo. Thanks for inviting me.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.